Okay, so we looked at a really substantial piece today. It's a very personal monologue, theological, about a journey through the conservative sort of MAGA world and ending up quite disillusioned with some key figures, especially around biblical faithfulness and Israel.
Yeah, a lot going on there. It's clearly written with real passion and conviction. You can feel that.
Absolutely. And it identifies some complex splits in American conservatism, right? Very articulate. But let's jump right into the feedback, because I think we can make it even stronger.
Sounds good.
So the first thing, and this really jumped out, is about refining the central focus. It feels like it's trying to do two big things at once.
Uh-huh. Like what specifically?
Well, you have this really compelling story of a political awakening, moving away from being a default Democrat, the whole pre-woke wokeness in San Jose, feeling that racial pressure. It's very relatable, very memoir-like.
Right. That part grabs you.
Exactly. But then the momentum just kind of hits a wall. It shifts pretty hard into this very detailed theological defense of Christian Zionism, deep dives into covenants, Genesis, the Messiah ruling from, actual Jerusalem.
Ah, okay. So it switches from personal story to like a theological essay almost.
Precisely. And that switch, it kind of diffuses the impact because the reader or listener loses that narrative thread they were following.
Yeah, I can see that. So what's the suggestion? How do we fix that kind of split focus?
Well, I think the key is to really prioritize one main objective. If the core goal is the political expose, the disillusionment, the critique of these influencers,
which it seems to be, largely.
Right. Then the deep dive into the theology of Israel needs to be condemned. Make it a foundational statement of belief, but then immediately use it as the lens to critique people like Candace, Tucker, Charlie Kirk. Don't let it become its own separate lecture.
Okay, so the belief becomes the why for the political critique, not a detour.
Exactly. It needs to be the engine driving the disillusionment story, not the brake stop.
That makes sense. You want that cause and effect clear. Like, here's what I firmly believe based on Scripture.
And this is where I saw these leaders compromise or contradict it, which is why I had to break away.
Got it. So maybe an example. How could that look?
Okay. So one way, just thinking out loud, is after setting up that feeling of finding a home in the MAGA, pivot right away. Something like, but I realized that home was maybe built on shaky ground because the question of God's promises, specifically regarding Israel, started revealing this deep rot among the voices I'd come to trust.
Ah, I see. So you introduce the theological point as the source of the conflict, the reason for the later disillusionment.
Precisely. It makes the theology integral to the plot, if you will, rather than an appendix. It drives the narrative forward.
Okay, that feels much tighter. Good first point. What's next?
All right, second point. This builds on clarity, too. It's about drawing clearer ideological lines, especially with those seen as potential allies, not just the obvious opponents.
Okay, sharpening the internal conflict within the movement?
Exact. The piece has this really powerful theme. The little leaven in the bread or the sprinkle of deviation leading to doctrines of devils. That concept is strong.
Yeah, the idea that subtle error is more dangerous.
Right. But then when it talks about figures who seem closer, like Matt Walsh, it sort of hedges. It says things like, I believe he's a good intending guy, or I don't know what's in the man's heart.
And the problem there is?
The problem is, if the core issue, the splintering point, as the author calls it, is Israel and the biblical view of it, and the critique is aimed at those promoting the eradication of Israel, ideologically if not physically, then hedging about near allies leaves the reader wondering
where exactly the line is drawn for those who aren't, say, Fuentes.
Exactly. We get clear examples of outright grifting, like monetizing Kirk's potential assassination or Carlson sitting down with Fuentes. Those are easy targets. But the piece argues the real danger is the subtle stuff, the enemy within.
So if you're arguing that you're probably worse because you know better, you need to show how those who supposedly know better are subtly deviating.
You nailed it. We need specific examples of how a seemingly orthodox conservative voice drifts just enough on this key Israel issue to justify the author's strong sense of separation. We need to see that sprinkle in action from someone respected within the movement.
Okay, so less focus on judging intentions, like what's in the heart, and more on the actual statements or positions.
Precisely. Make it about the ideology, not the person's perceived goodness.
So, concretely, how would you demonstrate that?
Well, the author actually mentions a specific quote. Israel is not a country, it is an experiment. That's a perfect example. That statement directly contradicts the everlasting covenant idea that's central to the author's stance.
Right.
So the piece needs to identify which otherwise respected conservative voices are echoing that sentiment or similar. Who is subtly undermining the Genesis to Revelation promises about Israel, even while sounding generally orthodox on other things.
Pinpoint that specific ideological deviation in someone the audience might otherwise trust.
Yes, attributing that kind of statement, that sprinkle, to a specific, respected figure makes the internal conflict undeniable. It shows the leaven in the supposedly good bread. It makes the argument sharp and specific, not just a general warning.
That moves it from a feeling of betrayal to a documented case of ideological divergence on the author's core issue. Much stronger.
Exactly. Okay, ready for the third point?
Yep, let's do it.
This one is about connecting the dots between the spiritual framing and the political call to action. Basically, structuring the link between the idea of a spiritual battle and the need for political engagement.
Okay, I think I see where this is going. There's a tension there sometimes.
There is. The piece does a great job elevating the conflict beyond just Democrat versus Republican. It centers it on spiritual allegiance. Nobody's going to dethrone him. My main affiliation is Christ. That's the core of the remnant idea mentioned.
Right, focusing on ultimate loyalty.
But then, alongside this intense focus on being a small, maybe 10% firm remnant, there's this urgent call. We need God's policies now more than ever, and we need a godly man in office now more than ever.
Okay, so the potential disconnect is if it's fundamentally a spiritual battle and you're just a small remnant, and the political system seems compromised anyway, why the push for political policies and godly leaders now? Wouldn't the remnant just withdraw and focus on spiritual purity?
That's the question it leaves hanging a bit. The listener might wonder, if the MAGA world is flawed and the battle is spiritual, why are we still talking about getting specific policies passed or certain people elected? The bridge between the spiritual reality and the political necessity needs to be clearer.
So it needs a clearer operational philosophy for the remnant. If the goal isn't necessarily winning elections in a compromised system, what is the purpose of political engagement for them?
Exactly. If the battle is spiritual, then political action needs to be defined primarily as a spiritual act. Maybe it's about standing firm, speaking truth, holding leaders accountable, rather than just strategy aimed at short-term electoral wins, which the remnant view kind of dismisses anyway.
Okay, so redefine political action for the remnant. It's not about winning power necessarily, but about demonstrating faithfulness within the political sphere.
I think that's the key. And again, the author provides a seed for this within the text itself. Remember the specific prayer mentioned for the president?
Praying someone witnesses to him, preaches the gospel unapologetically?
Right. That could be framed as the primary, actionable political mission for the remnant. It's about moral and spiritual accountability. It's evangelical. It's about confronting leadership with truth unapologetically.
So the goal isn't necessarily getting deals signed, like the critique of Patrick David's views seem to imply, but ensuring leaders are confronted with moral and theological truth.
Exactly. The pursuit of godly policies, then, becomes less about lobbying and more about the byproduct of having leaders who are spiritually grounded or at least continually called to account by a faithful remnant. The engagement is about witness and accountability, not just policy win.
That reframes political action as a spiritual duty of the remnant, closing that gap between the spiritual diagnosis and the political prescription. It gives them a clear mission that isn't just about electoral math.
Precisely. It provides that logical bridge. You're fighting for souls and truth in the public square, which is a spiritual task, even if it involves engaging with political figures.
Okay, those are 3 really solid points. Focus, precision on the lines of division, and clarity on the remnant's political action.
Yeah, I think so. This is already powerful stuff, very thoughtful, but hitting these points will just sharpen its edge and make the argument even more compelling, more intellectually rigorous.
Definitely. So just to quickly recap the actionable takeaways for the writer.
Go for it.
First, pick a lane for the main narrative. Decide if it's primarily the political journey using theology as the lens or the other way around, but make one the clear focus to drive the piece forward. Don't let the theology stall the story.
Right. Make theology the engine, not the brake.
Second, get specific about the sprinkle. Pinpoint actual statements or ideological positions from those near allies, the seemingly orthodox figures that cross the author's stated red line on Israel. Show, don't just tell, the subtle deviation.
Move from judging intent to judging stated doctrine.
And third, clarify the why of political action for the remnant. Frame it as a spiritual act like holding leaders accountable,
speaking truth, witnessing, rather than just aiming for policy wins in a system viewed as compromised. Make that link explicit.
Excellent summary. Implementing those, I think, will really elevate the piece. It turns a deeply felt personal story into a really robust philosophical and political argument.
Agreed. It's strong material, and these refinements will just give it more punch. You've really laid out the core issues well. Now it's about executing those adjustments.
Absolutely. And we genuinely love to see the revised version. Please feel free to send it back our way for another look once you've had a chance to work.
Yeah, definitely. Keep refining, keep pushing. Good work.